Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. And we're once again going to be talking about this Heat-Knicks series as well as Lakers versus Warriors in this video. I know some of you have been wondering, where is the talk about the Celtics-Sixers series and also Suns versus Nuggets? I've just been very busy over this past week or so. A lot of you will know that I've been traveling, and for some reason, it just seems to be those nights where those two teams are playing, or those four teams are playing those two series, where I'm just the most busy. So this half of the scheduling has kind of gotten more of my attention, but I promise Monday you will get a video about those two series. Sixers Celtics and Suns Nuggets game 3 are today, as you're probably seeing this video. So if you want to hear me talk about that, make sure to look out for that video tomorrow. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and get into this and begin with this Heat-Knicks series, which has been pretty fun so far. The first two games were really close. It's a battle of two underdogs where the Heat were the 6-8 seed ever to upset a 1 seed. The Knicks knocked off a Cavs team that was favored in pretty dominant fashion. They won 4-1, as did the Heat over the Bucks. And maybe it's because of the underdog narrative or the fact that these two teams kind of just match up well with each other. It's been some fun basketball so far. The Heat took game 1 with Jimmy Butler leading the charge as usual. Now, unfortunately, he did go down with an ankle injury towards the end of that game, which kept him out of game 2. But even still, the Heat made things really competitive in game 2, a phenomenal team effort to very nearly take game 2 in Madison Square Garden over the Knicks, who got Julius Randle back, and he had a great game in that one. So did Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, Josh Hart, and ultimately New York was able to pull out a very narrow win over the Jimmy Butler-less Heat, but it wasn't a great sign. To me, that game showed that the Knicks, yeah, they got the win, and ultimately that's what matters most, are wins in the playoffs. But that was a game that they probably should have been able to make a statement for the most part in a lot of these series. Like take, for example, Sixers versus Celtics. The Sixers took game 1 against Boston, but in game 2, the Celtics slammed the door shut in their face and blew them out. In Lakers Warriors, which we'll talk about in a bit, the Lakers took game 1. The Warriors then just destroyed the Lakers in game 2, again on their home court. The Knicks had a chance to go ahead and do that, especially with Jimmy Butler out, but it took Herculean efforts from their best 4 players probably to get a win over a Heat team, once again without probably the MVP of the playoffs so far in Jimmy G Bucket. So it was a little bit concerning, but the Knicks had a chance to go ahead and put all of those concerns to rest in game 3 in Miami. But instead of doing that, they only heightened those, because not only did they lose this game, they got absolutely blown out, losing by 19 points as the Heat held the Knicks to just 86 points, their second lowest scoring mark of this entire season. And not only did they not score 90 points in the game, they also had not a single player on their roster shoot 50% or better. Most notably, Julius Randle shot 4 of 15. Jalen Brunson shot 7 of 20 for 35%. RJ Barrett shot 5 of 16, shooting below 33%. Emmanuel Quickly was right there at the 33% mark, shooting 4 of 12 from the field as he continues to struggle in these playoffs. They got absolutely clamped. Like, this was the most loss that the Knicks offense has looked these entire playoffs, and it's not been phenomenal all the way throughout. I mean, they faced a great defense in Cleveland and also a pretty good defense in Miami so far, so it's understandable that they haven't had their best offensive performances, but this one was a complete disaster, and it was both in part due to their own execution, but also the high-level defense of the Heat, and mainly, they were led by Bam Adebayo, who on the stat sheet had a good game. He had 17 points, 12 boards, and a block on 50% shooting. But beyond the stat sheet, he was absolutely phenomenal, dominating on the glass, being an absolute force in the interior, just being a high-level defensive player as he's been his entire career. I still think at some point Bam Adebayo probably will and should get a Defensive Player of the Year award. Who knows when it's actually going to happen, but Bam continues to be just an electric defender, and he really, for the most part, shut down everything that the Knicks wanted to do. Now, once again, it was partially due to their own incompetence at times on the offensive end. They were chucking up a lot of really early in the shot clock threes. They weren't getting into sets very well. They were getting easily disrupted. They just seemed all around disjointed in this game. I don't know if they were shook by the fact that they're in Miami, the fact that they hardly won that game 2 with the Heat not having Jimmy Butler, but something was off. The Knicks just did not look good in this one, and really all series, they've looked like the worst team. Like, even in that Game 2 win, the Heat outplayed them for the most part. It was just ultimately star power down the stretch and some late-game heroics from Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson that saved the Knicks in the end, but for the most part, the Heat have looked like the better team, and in this one, outside of Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler once again had a phenomenal game with 28 points, 4 boards, and 3 dimes, which, as crazy as it sounds, really isn't even that great of a Jimmy Jimmy Butler game when you compare it to some of the other performances that he's had so far in this playoff run. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still amazing. Just Jimmy's been so good that this feels kind of pedestrian at this point for him. It's normal for playoff Jimmy Butler. Max Strus was also really good in this one with 19 points and 3 rebounds as he continues his great play. Kyle Lowry had 14 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists with a block. He's actually been one of the top shot blockers for the Heat so far in these playoffs, which is just an absurd stat, but the Heat are an absurd team at this point. He keeps playing well off the bench while Gabe Vincent continues to start. He didn't have his best game in this one, but he's been great for pretty much this entire run, so he gets a pass. And yeah, the Heat just, as usual, led by Jimmy Butler and getting some great play from the supporting cast, got another win. It's been a recipe that's worked for them continuously in the playoffs, as they've only lost 2 games so far, playing the Milwaukee Bucks and now the New York Knicks. They've looked like the better team. They seem poised to maybe make a conference finals. They're just 2 wins away from that. And when they get there, anything could happen. I mean, with the way this Heat team is playing, I don't think a conference finals run or even a finals run is out of the question for the way that the Heat have been so far. And obviously, this is all pretty unexpected from Miami. They were the 6-8 seed to ever take down a 1 seed, and they did it against the number 1 overall seeded and championship favorite Milwaukee Bucks, who got Giannis back, but it didn't matter because the Heat were still able to get things done in that series. All throughout the regular season, they were always a good but not great squad. In their play-in game, the first one that they had against the Atlanta Hawks, which they lost, they looked terrible. They looked really out of sync. They didn't look ready at all for the bright stage. It just felt like this Heat team was not destined for a run at all like what they're doing right now, where they're 2 wins away from making back-to-back conference finals. One is a 1 seed and one as an 8 seed, which it feels like has to be the first time that has ever happened in the history of the league. I don't even have to do research. I'm about 99% sure that has never happened before. It's just such a crazy stat and a wild turnaround for this Heat team that, like I said, all season kind of felt dead in the water. I mean, there were Heat fans. One of my best friends, Matt, actually was calling for the Heat, he's a Heat fan, to start this thing over. He was saying maybe we should move on from guys. I really don't know what direction this team is going. He was kind of over it, and it was understandable because the Heat were playing pretty uninspired, and it really felt like they were going nowhere when the playoffs rolled around. And obviously, the Heat are famous for being able to flip the switch when they get to the playoffs. But what they're doing right now is unprecedented for a number of reasons. Like I mentioned, the upset seeding-wise, but also when you take a look at who they were in the regular season and who they are now, it's night and day. Like, I'm stunned that this is still the same team that we're seeing right now as the one that played all 82 games leading up to these playoffs. It's just completely absurd. And so I wanted to take a second to kind of put into context just how wild this turnaround has been for them, because I don't think people realize just how absurd what we're watching actually is. And obviously, it all starts with Jimmy Butler, who we know turns it up in the playoffs, but he's never been this good before, because right now, through the first 7 games of the playoffs that he's played so far, he is averaging 34.4 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 1.6 steals on 56.4% shooting, while shooting 40% from 3. That's absurd. Like, those are ridiculous numbers. He's probably been the MVP of the playoffs so far. And last year, he was once again good in the playoffs. I mean, they made a Game 7 of the conference finals type run, but he averaged 7 less points per game while shooting a lot worse from the field. In his legendary 2020 finals run, he averages 22.2 points per game, which is 12 less on worse shooting. Throughout the regular season this year, he was good, but he wasn't even an all-star, which was partially due to injuries. But he's completely turned it up to a new level. Playoff Jimmy Butler has taken on a completely new meaning, and he seems completely unstoppable, like one of the best players on the planet right now. He's hitting levels that I didn't even know he had in his tank. He's never been this good. And part of that was the fact that he set a Heat franchise record with 56 points in a playoff game back in Game 4 against Milwaukee. He sent the game to overtime in Game 5, which they ultimately ended up winning to seal that series with a ridiculous falling away alley-oop shot. And he did most of that while being guarded by Drew Holiday, one of the premier perimeter defender in the league according to most people. It's completely ridiculous what Jimmy Butler has done so far. I know we talk about playoff Jimmy Butler, but this is something completely different. Meanwhile, the Heat as a whole have just out of the blue found a completely new offensive identity as 3-point snipers. Over the course of the regular season, the Heat ranked 27th in the league in three-point shooting percentage, just 34.4% from deep as a team. And once again, during the regular season, their best shooter by far was Tyler Hero, who shot 37.8% from deep on 8 attempts per game, which is really good. Like, that is really high-level three-point shooting, but he got injured towards the start of the playoffs, so you think a bad three-point shooting team that lost their best three-point shooter clearly would regress a lot and be terrible at three-point shooting. But no, because the Heat continued to defy logic. Suddenly, the second the playoffs rolled around, they became elite at shooting the deep ball. They're shooting 39.2% from three, which is good for the second best mark in the playoffs, only behind the Boston Celtics. That's without Tyler Hero, their best shooter easily, who's still out for a few weeks with a broken hand. You have Duncan Robinson, who suddenly remembered how to shoot, knocking down 48.6% of his three-point looks. You've got Jimmy Butler shooting 40% from deep, Max Strus shooting 38.5% from deep, Gabe Vincent is shooting 37.7%, Caleb Martin is shooting 37.5%, Kevin Love is shooting 37%, Kyle Lowry 35.7%. The only players on the Heat shooting below 35% from the three-point line are Bam Adebayo and Cody Zeller, who just straight up don't shoot threes. They're shooting 0% because they don't shoot threes. It's become a squad of snipers after being terrible from deep this entire season. It just does not make sense. And it's not just the threes. Their offense as a whole just looks so much more dynamic. It's fluid. They've figured out how to score points suddenly. In the regular season, they had the 25th ranked offense in the league with an offensive rating of 112.3, only sitting ahead of Charlotte, the Spurs, the Pistons, the Rockets, and the Magic, 5 of the worst teams in the league this season. And now in the playoffs, they're the second best offense, again behind Boston, with a 117.1 offensive rating. They completely flipped the switch, going from this lock you down defensive team that absolutely had no idea how to score the ball to being an elite team offensively where they can light you up from the perimeter, they can attack you inside, they're going to dice your defense apart. There's nothing you can do against this Heat team. Like, they're just completely locked in, and once again, they're doing all of this offensive destruction without Tyler Hero, who averaged over 20 points per game for them all season and was their best three-point shooter. It's absurd. And if they get him back soon from that broken hand, which they might if they make it out of this series and even if they make the NBA Finals, that's terrifying because they're going to be, as one of the best offensive teams right now in the NBA, they're going to be adding a 20-point per game scorer who's a knockdown three-point shooter. Now, he'll probably struggle a bit coming off of that hand injury, but if he finds at all his footing, it's terrifying. There's also the fact that the rotation is currently utilizing 5 undrafted players, which has been a theme of the Miami Heat for a while, but it feels like they're relying on them more now than ever, and it's working. I mean, this Heat team and this franchise as a whole is just so good at identifying talent that so many other people miss, and not just identifying it, but developing these players, making them into high-level contributors in a playoff run. They're starting 3 of those undrafted players and fighting for a conference finals berth, which is practically unheard of, and they're playing such integral roles to their success. It's not just like a couple of role players. Like, they're some of the most important players on this team, whether it's Gabe Vincent or Max Strus or Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith providing big minutes. Undrafted guys are a staple of the Heat for a few years now, but right now more than ever, they're being high-level contributors that are a big reason why the Heat are in the position that they are. I mean, undrafted guys almost took down the Knicks in Game 2 without Jimmy Butler. They were the big reason why the Heat got so close to stealing that game and now being up 3-0. We're also getting some high-level play from Kyle Lowry, who, despite being on one of the biggest contracts on the team and being an NBA champion, has accepted a bench role, letting Gabe Vincent start in his place, and he's been so great in that role, whether he's knocking down threes, playmaking, or just making some really high-level defensive plays, whether that means getting a big-time steal, defending someone one-on-one, or taking a charge, which Kyle Lowry is known for. He's making high-level plays at basically every turn, despite this past season having one of his worst regular seasons in quite some time. His age was really starting to show. He really was not a high-level offensive producer. His defense seemed to take a bit of a hit. Now, he still had those scrappy, winning-type plays that Kyle Lowry typically makes, but it really feels like in the playoffs, he's found his role in this old age, being 37 years old, and he's thriving in it. This Heat team, everybody has accepted their position. They're thriving in the role that they've been given and making the most out of every opportunity, to the tune of being one of the most ridiculous turnarounds that we've seen in quite some time in the NBA. Again, it genuinely makes no sense. The Heat should not be this good offensively, but they are. They shouldn't be able to knock down threes like this, but they are. Jimmy shouldn't be this unstoppable, but he is. A team with this many undrafted players probably shouldn't be this successful in the playoffs, where stars are usually key, but they are succeeding. They're defying all expectations and doing it in spectacular fashion. It's been so incredibly fun to watch everything that the Heat have done so far, whether it's their upset, whether it's what they've done so far in this series against the Knicks with and without Jimmy Butler, and what they'll probably do in the conference finals, because they seem so firmly in control of this series at this moment. I wouldn't be surprised at all at this point if they make a run to the NBA Finals. So at this point, I'm just going to watch the ride, enjoy what I've been witnessing, and once again, just try and figure out how anything that the Heat are doing is at all possible. For the Knicks, I think the way this series has gone is kind of boiled down to a couple of problems. Number one, they obviously need Julius Randle to be a lot better than he's been so far in these playoffs. He was bad back in 2021. Again, he's just not playing like the Julius Randle we got used to all season, the All-Star, the All-NBA player. He just hasn't been that guy so far. And I don't know if it's just kind of playoff nerves, if it's, going up against a high-level defender like Bam Adebayo in the front court now. And last series, it was Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. I don't know if it's just the defenses that he's going against, but at some point you think he would get things going. It just has not been the case so far for him in the playoffs. He's got to be a lot better than he's been. Maybe he won't be. Maybe this is just kind of the Julius Randle that we're going to get in the playoffs going forward. But I'm going to hold out hope that somehow he figures things out, because sure, like most guys on the roster struggled tonight. I mean, RJ Barrett really struggled, but he's had some big moments. Jalen Brunson has been great for the most part these entire playoffs, even if he struggled tonight. Like the other guys who struggled have had other good games. It just feels like struggling is a consistent theme for Julius Randle, whether it was last playoffs or these. It's just been really disappointing. And also, Tom Thibodeau has not been great so far coaching-wise in this series. Erik Spoelstra is coaching circles around him. I haven't been impressed with really any of the adjustments that he's made so far, mainly because it feels like he hasn't really made any adjustments of any significance so far in this series. We'll see what he does going into this next game that is pretty much a must-win. You cannot go down 3-1 against the Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler the way that they're playing right now. This game, the Heat didn't even play that well. I mean, they shot terribly from three, even though they've been great all playoffs so far, and you still got blown out. This was probably your best opportunity, and they just completely collapsed. Moving over now to Lakers versus Warriors Game 3. I know I spent a lot of time on that, so this video is probably getting long. I won't spend too much time on this game in particular, but yeah, right now we've got Warriors-Lakers Game 3, which has also been a really interesting series so far. Game 1 was electric, but outside of that, we saw a couple of blowouts. Last game, Golden State, like I mentioned earlier in the video, completely destroyed the Lakers in Game 2 on their home court after LA stole that really, really fun Game 1. And in Game 3, we got another blowout as these teams just kind of continue to trade wins, with the Lakers defeating the Warriors by 30 points in the first game in LA to take a 2-1 series lead. And they were, for the most part, led by Anthony Davis, who had 25 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and 4 blocks. A ridiculously dominant effort from Anthony Davis, who continues to do this weird thing where, for the most part, basically every night he's elite defensively. I don't think that's ever really a question with him, but offensively, he just kind of forgets how to play like every other night. It's super weird. If we go ahead and take a look at his game log, tonight he had 25 points on 70% shooting. The game before that, he had 11 points. The game before that, he had 30. Game before that, he had 16, although that was the blowout win over Memphis where he didn't play a ton, so that's pretty excusable. The game before that, he had 31 points. He prefaced that one with a 12-point outing on 4 of 13 shooting. It's every other game. He either scores 13, 14, 16 points, or he scores 25 to 30. I don't know what the common narrative is. I don't know if it's just good adjustments that he then figures out in the next game. I don't know if he just takes a back seat every other night. He's tired. I don't know what's going on, but if the Lakers could get a consistent Anthony Davis for a 2-3 game stretch, they've got a great chance to go ahead and steal this series. I mean, he's still been great defensively, like I said. I just don't know what's going on with the every other day offensive struggles that he's had. If you've got any idea, let me know in the comments, because I am befuddled by what's going on right there. LeBron James had 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists after not shooting the entire first quarter for the first time in his playoff career tonight. Great game from LeBron James. Shout out to him. He was really solid. Some great defensive plays in there as well, as the Lakers kind of built up that lead to an eventual blowout where obviously he ended up sitting for a majority of the end of this game. D'Angelo Russell was also phenomenal when he played with 21 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists while knocking down 5 threes. Been pretty impressed by by him recently. Dennis Schroeder had 12 points. Lonnie Walker got a lot of run in this game, which hasn't been typical in the playoffs so far for the Lakers, and he put up 12 points, likely earning himself a spot in the rotation going forward. It was just a big bounce back win from the Lakers all around across the board by the team. They looked really good. When the Lakers are locked in like this, they look really hard to beat both offensively and defensively. So shout out to them. This was one of their best games of the playoffs so far. Probably their second best game behind that crazy dominant win over the Grizzlies where they won by 40. They held the Warriors to below 40% shooting from the field. The defense was amazing. Everything was great. I don't think there's a single thing you can complain about in this game if you're a Lakers fan. We'll see if they're able to replicate it in game 4 or if the Warriors, like they did last game, have a crazy bounce back effort. Speaking of Golden State, in this one, it just was really not their night. The Lakers defense was stifling, and even when they were getting looks that they typically knock down, they just weren't falling. Steph Curry shot 9 of 21 from the field. Klay Thompson went 5 of 14. Draymond struggled with some foul problems. Dante DiVincenzo was 2 of 8 from the field. Jordan Poole was 2 of 9. They just couldn't seem to get anything going after they racked up an 11-point lead in the second quarter. Suddenly, the Lakers went on, I think it was like a 13-2, 15-2 run. They took a lead, and from that point on, the Lakers just looked like the far better team. The Warriors just kind of forgot how to score after that point. We'll see what adjustments they make. Obviously, they made some great ones and bounced back in game 2 after losing in game 1. I expect them to kind of do the same thing, to be honest. I kind of just expect these teams to continue to trade blows back and forth until an eventual game 7. Hopefully that's the case, because a game 7 in Chase Center with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, LeBron James, Anthony Davis would be incredible. That would be peak hoops. So hopefully we do end up getting that outcome. I say that as a neutral fan. I'm sure Lakers and Warriors fans do not want that whatsoever. But at the same time, maybe the Lakers go out and grab a 3-1 lead if Anthony Davis doesn't have his usual fall apart game that he has every other night. But we'll see what happens going into game 4. Super excited for that. And yeah, the series, even though there have been a couple of blowouts, I've been entertained. With all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to let me know in the comment section below what your biggest takeaways were from these games, and also please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It helps the channel out a ton. Like I said, tomorrow you're going to see a video talking about those other 2 series, so if you've been waiting for me to talk about those, make sure to look out for that. With all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.